Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I swear on my mother's head I didn't do it. I'm Cubby Selby, alcoholic, and I'm innocent. Even if I am with, well, never mind. I travel with some strange people now that I got sober. I used to just know mostly cutthroats and thieves and hoods, but people I travel with now, my God, phew, they wear snakeskin boots, play harmonicas. Who would have thunk? Anyway, I'm delighted to be here because I'm delighted to be sober. I don't particularly like my life. Anyway, won't bother with that. It's the only one I have right now. But the thing that's amazing about it is that I love being sober, no matter how unhappy I am with circumstances in my life and my physical existence. I love being sober, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was committed as a morbid, depressive, suicidal schizophrenic, subtitled Happy, Joyous, and Free. But I really didn't mind being called all that because there was no mention of alcoholism. I mean, nobody said anything about drinking. So you can call me anything you want. But the amazing thing about that diagnosis, shall we say, and the fact that I'm quite unhappy with my physical existence, is the fact that I love my mind. One of the things that has happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous is I became aware of my mind. Not what I thought was my mind, but my mind. And it turns out that my mind is a very beautiful, peaceful, and tranquil place, which is really rather amazing for a morbid, depressive, suicidal schizophrenic. You know. And I never knew that mind existed. I lose touch with it quite frequently, but it is a wondrous, wondrous place. I'm a little different than a lot of people in AA. I never drank in high school, and I never drank in college. I never went to high school, and I never went to college. But I learned how to drink. Yeah, and I learned the old-fashioned way like we all did, ultimately. And I never drank successfully. I lost my first job due to drinking at the age of 15, and of course it got progressively worse. But I loved alcohol. I love alcohol. I think it's the gift of the gods. To me, it's not a coincidence that the word spirit means God and it means booze. Because if you're anything like me, drinking was a spiritual experience. Because I could never live in my own skin. I was always consumed by my feelings, and I never had any idea what I was feeling, because I was afraid of them. And I covered them all with a rage, an all-consuming rage, so that I went through life like a scream looking for a mouth. And I couldn't live inside my own skin. I couldn't live in this world. I knew there was something so morally defective about me, I didn't have the right to breathe this wondrous air we have out here. And I knew there was something so inadequate I could never make it in this world. And I had no idea that I was overwhelmed with a sense of shame and guilt and inadequacy. I had no way of defining these things. And I certainly had no way of dealing with them. And all of a sudden I take a drink. Oh, and the angels sing, the angels. I'll tell you, man, I take a drink and the grand illusion takes over. All of a sudden I'm no longer consumed with these feelings. I'm no longer concerned about who's being hurt. I don't care about anything. I convince myself that I'm not afraid. I'm no longer inadequate. I'm smugly superior. And it makes it possible for me to get through a day. So I can't see where alcohol is a problem, because it is the answer. It's the most wondrous answer in the world. So I've come to believe that the most devastating thing a human being can experience is to feel separated from themselves. Now, I had no idea this is what I was experiencing all my life. Being separated from you, if I could believe that, that was a joy. I hated the idea of being a people. To think that I was the same as you yahoos just devastated me. So that's fine. And being separated from God, the big weasel in the sky, Mongo Magab, who needs it, right? So that's cool. But to feel separated from me, that's unbearable. It is absolutely unbearable. Real separation from self is total insanity, of course. But I didn't know this is what I'm feeling. But what happens when I drink, I feel unified. I feel whole. And I have a sense of peace that I never knew existed. It's a wondrous, wondrous transformation. And I don't have to study some technique for 20 years to have this experience. I just take a drink. That's all. I just take a drink. Ba-boom. And I'm transformed. So how can I believe alcohol is a problem? It's obviously, it is the answer. Now, I will admit that my drinking can be a problem for you. Not for me. So I tend to black out rather rapidly and become extraordinarily violent. So your objections, I must admit, there's a certain validity to them. I black out and I might kill you. But that's the chance I have to take. You see? And I'm willing to take that chance. Believe me, I'm willing to take that. Easy come, easy go. So is somebody else to squeeze the grapes. I'm willing to go to any lengths, take any chance to experience that sense of unity and peace. And I'll do anything for that. And it makes sense, because what is the one thing the whole human race needs to do is to feel unified, right? To bridge that sense of separation. And that's what it's all about. And so all I have to do is take a drink and I'm there. So I can't perceive alcohol as a problem. I left home at 15. I was a merchant seaman. And at 18, I was taken off a ship in Germany, and they said I couldn't live more than 2 months. I had TB. Both lungs were totally shot. I had absolutely no lungs left. And yet 2 weeks before this day, I jumped off the ship while we were going through the canal in Antwerp, and I ran to a wine shop, got 4 or 5 bottles of wine. I ran back to the ship. It wasn't a great distance, but today I look at it, and the fact that I ran that distance without any lungs is a certain significance for me. Because I doubt if an non-alcoholic would run a quarter of a mile without any lungs to get 4 or 5 bottles of wine. However, A non-alcoholic doesn't understand singleness of purpose the way I do. They're not motivated. They're just not motivated the way I am. Yeah. But I could not see at the time where that indicated I had an abnormal relationship with alcohol. And of course, I didn't see that until many, many years later. As a matter of fact, everything I say are things I've learned in retrospect, sometimes many years later. I certainly had no idea what was happening at the time they were happening. So I can't see where I'm powerless over alcohol. I can't accept that. And I can't accept that my life had become unmanageable, because if I did, I'd have to look at why. My drinking would be threatened, and I just couldn't afford that. Yet by the time I was 22 years old, I had spent more than 3 years in bed. I had 10 ribs cut out. I had one lung collapse, a piece of the other one cut out. And I used an experimental drug to keep me alive, and it impaired my vision and my hearing. My inner ear was almost totally destroyed. And I couldn't walk properly, and I'd fall down in the dark. All my muscles were petrified from this drug. And I went crazy. It frizzled my brain. And then things started to get bad. They did. They got worse. And that's a guarantee we have as drunks. No matter how bad things are, drinking eventually will make them worse. It's a flat-out guarantee. That's an absolute certainty. Now, I've always known in my innermost self I can't drink, so in order to protect my right to drink, I had to keep that information away from my awareness. And I did that by developing a belief system of lies. I taught myself what is true is false and what is false is true. The basic lie being that alcohol is the answer, not the problem. One of the things I did to protect my right to drink was use heroin. And I went on a 6-year heroin sobriety maintenance program. And it proved conclusively to me I am not an alcoholic. You can't possibly be alcoholic if you're only getting drunk once or twice a month or whenever necessary and shooting $100 a day worth of heroin. You just cannot be alcoholic. Now, this program, although as I say it worked, got to be a little habitual and expensive. Now, the second step, of course, implies that we're nuts. And what I did was I left New York and I moved to Hollywood to get away from drugs. And because I'm so sincere, it worked, courtesy of the LA Sheriff's Department. I had just copped and I'd stopped for a red light. And the man came up to the car. He put a .357 Magnum to my head and inquired about my social behavior. Anyway, to make a long story short, they strapped me down in solitary and I kicked my habit, which is definitely the no-frills approach of doing it. But I'll tell you something, man, it's a guaranteed treatment. And after a week, they asked me if I wanted to come out of that cell. I said, no. I can't tell you how safe I felt in that cell. Not safe from you or the world or anything else, but I felt safe from me. Because I had the great ability, as is absolutely necessary if you're alcoholic, to lie to myself and to believe those lies. But somehow I just no longer could believe that I wasn't doing me in somehow. I didn't know what I was doing or how I was doing it, but I knew that somehow I was doing me in. And I knew I was safe from me locked in that cell. So I stayed there a month, and they kicked me out, put me with population for a month, and a lawyer came up and bailed me out, put me in a hospital for a month. And then suddenly I was back out on the streets in that same world I'm terrified of, same world I've never understood, only this time I hadn't had a drink for 90 days. And I was so terrified I couldn't cross the street. The only thing that got me through an intersection was going for a drink. It was the only thing that got me across the street. And that went on for 15 months. And the woman I was living with brought home another woman with 3 children because they had no place to live. And so they moved in. And this guy used to come and visit this woman. And then one Friday night, he came and he visited with me. As I say, I'm a blackout drinker, so I don't remember more than a total perhaps of 30 seconds from the entire night, and I think he was there all night. But I do remember him coming into the room. And then I remember at some point in the middle of the night, he got up and he walked over to where I was sitting, and he dropped a book in my lap, and he said, "I'm tired, you read to me." So I guess he had been reading to me. I don't know. I assume from that remark that he had been. And I remember putting the book on the table, opening it up, and that's the last thing I remember. But it turned out that I read the big book to this man. Now, I don't know how much I read, but evidently I read enough to identify with the problem and to recognize the answer. Because he took me to a meeting the following night, and I've been sober ever since. And that was the 29th of March, 1969. And a couple of things happened in the next 12 or 16 hours that forced me to believe that miracles are possible without my consent. And I am really delighted to know that. However, I've come to believe that if I want to participate in that miracle, I must cooperate with it if I intend to experience it for the rest of my life. Anyway, he took me to this meeting, and I hated everything about it. The only thing I knew absolutely at that first meeting was that I am not an alcoholic. That was the one thing I knew with certainty. My head was screaming at everything I saw, everything I heard. Yet when he took me home, I heard myself say, "Can I go to another meeting?" Now, I had no intention of saying that. And I've come to realize that I did not say that. But I've also become aware of the fact there is more to Cubby than I was aware of at that time. There is an inner being, an inner Cubby that spoke those words through me. So at that first meeting, I was given the gift of sobriety. The obsession to drink was removed. I haven't had a drink since then. And when I asked the man, "Can I go to another meeting?" I took the second step. Let me repeat. I had no idea what was happening at the time. It is only in retrospect that I understand what happened. Now, the next morning, I got up and I started my day in the usual way. I started a fight with the woman I was living with in order to justify storming out of the house and getting drunk. Because I always have to justify drinking, because in my inner self I know I have no business drinking. So I did that. I went storming out of the house, and I was standing on the corner waiting to cross the street, waiting for the light to change. And that same voice I've heard in my head my entire life was screaming at me with the same viciousness. But on the basis of one AA meeting, 2 words got changed. It said, "I'll show her. I won't drink. I'll stay sober." And my body turned around and went back to the house. And that morning, the second step took me. I was restored to sanity, and I've been totally and absolutely sane with respect to alcohol since that morning. Now, I have spent most of my sobriety mad as a hatter. And I use that word deliberately, mad as a hatter. But I've been totally and absolutely sane. And how I define sanity in the second step is simply that I can no longer believe the lies necessary to believe in order to justify taking the first drink. I can no longer believe that drinking will improve the quality of my life in any way. I was restored to sanity. So the first meeting, I was given the gift of sobriety. That night, I took the second step. The next morning, the second step took me.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
So now I'm face to face with the third step. Now, I've come to believe that all of life can be put down to a very simple formula. Decision, action, result. I make a decision, I take an action, and there's an inevitable result. Not always predictable, but inevitable. I've also come to believe that somehow I made a decision to be unaware of my decisions. Therefore, whatever happens to me is not my doing. It is your fault. You did it to me. So it's important for me to trace back these things and see the decisions I made and the actions that I've taken predicated on that decision, and then I understand the results. So I didn't drink for 30 days. 30 days. At the end of 30 days, and I wasn't trying to stay sober, as I remember, I just didn't drink. I guess it didn't occur to me. I don't know. The obsession was removed, and I just didn't drink. And at the end of 30 days, I was stark raving sober. As we all know, there is only one thing worse than drinking, and that's not drinking. It's the only thing that is worse than drinking. But you see, this inner being that I was unaware of made a decision that we should stay sober. So I say, I have to cooperate with this thing. And I believe that's why we have a program. If we didn't have a program of recovery, we wouldn't have to cooperate. Just go our own little way. But I have to cooperate with it if I want to experience that miracle for the rest of my life. So it made a decision that we should stay sober. So I took the appropriate action. I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I asked for help. Now, the reason that I was stark raving sober was very simple. You take away the most important thing in someone's life, you must replace it with something of value. Nature cannot and will not accept a vacuum. Alcohol had become the most important thing in my life. It healed that sense of separation within me. And when you take alcohol out of my life, as happened at the first meeting, I'm left with that dark, black, cancerous sense of separation that I started with. And if it's not replaced with something of value, I must drink. I have absolutely no choice in the matter. I'm an alcoholic and I am powerless over alcohol. I must drink. And I believe Alcoholics Anonymous is that something of value that fills that hole and fulfills every need I shall ever have for the rest of my life. So I went to this meeting, I asked for help, and the help was instantly and automatically there. Now again, I didn't understand what was happening at the time, but today I see that the answer is very simple and very obvious. The reason the answer was there is that the answer is in the asking. It is that simple and that obvious. You cannot have a problem without already having the answer. It is a spiritual impossibility to have a problem without having the answer. However, ready for the disclaimer? I still have this belief system of lies that I developed and nurtured to protect my right to drink. So I'm unaware of already having what it is I am so desperately looking for. But when I come up to you and say, help me, tell me what to do, I've given up. I've surrendered. And instantly the answer is available to me from within me. And there is never any other place I will find my answer. I will never find it outside of me because the problem is within me. The answer is within me. As a matter of fact, nothing exists outside of Cubby for Cubby other than an opportunity for Cubby to give everything away. This is the only thing that exists outside of me for me. So the answer was instantly and automatically there. It revealed to me from within. And then when you share with me what you did at that point in your sobriety, you make it possible for me to identify the answer in whatever way I need to stay sober for the next 24 hours. So after 30 days, I asked for help, and I was given the gift of recovery. Now I'm face to face with the third step, and that's a sticky wicket because the word God is there. And the kindest thing I ever said about God is that it's dog spelled backwards. After my last operation, I was in a coma for 4 days. At some point in that period, I opened my eyes as the chaplain walked in the room, and I stayed conscious long enough, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, long enough to shake my head no and watch him leave, because I knew he was there to give me the hocus pocus and I didn't have anything to do with it. Because I was determined that if I died, I was going to die giving God the finger. And if there was such a thing called God, I couldn't wait to die so I could meet it, spit in its face, and tell it what I thought of it. I've been told that's an attitude. And AA is the only place I know where you can bring an attitude like mine and have it turned into a love affair, not by going to church, not by taking religious instructions or studying theology or dogma or metaphysics or psychology, but by not taking one drink one day at a time and hanging out with a bunch of sober drunks. And that's exactly what happened. Now again, time for another decision. And that inner being, in spite of this hatred that I have, this inner being knows we have to take this third step if we're going to stay sober. So it made the decision. And I'm asking people, how do you take the third step? How do you take the third step? And again, it's not until years later that I realized that as soon as I asked the question, it meant I had taken the step. But I couldn't see it at the time. I could not see that simply asking somebody, how do you take the third step, meant I had taken the third step. In time it became simple and obvious. Because it only asks me to make a decision. And that decision had been made. Now I have to follow it with a program of vigorous action. As the book suggests, following the third step. Now, it seemed like every meeting I went to, 5,000 people were talking about prayer. I don't know what to do about this. I mean, prayer, what? Anyway, I copied the third step prayer from the book, and I copied the St. Francis prayer, and I tacked them on the wall. I wake up in the morning and I read them. And I go about my business, and at night I'd read them and go to bed. And then it seemed like everyone's saying, you have to kneel when you pray, you have to kneel. And I said, oh, Christ. All right, I'll try it. And the funny thing is, I didn't know I desperately wanted to be sober. But I even tried to kneel. 20 and 30 times a day I tried it. And I couldn't do it. My knees just would not bend. Then I was sober 4 months, I took my fifth step. When I finished, my sponsor showed me the pages in the book to read that tell you exactly what to do for 6 and 7. And I went home and I did as the book suggests. And when I had taken the sixth step, I was made aware of it. And I've come to believe that the essence of the sixth step is simply that when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, I am willing to let it go. So I don't believe it's possible to hold on to pain. However, I think what the problem is, I have a misconception of what will make me feel good. And I have the insane belief that I can get free of pain by pursuing pleasure, never realizing the obvious that pleasure and pain are one and the same thing. You cannot be separated. The only difference between pleasure and pain is perception, just my judgment. They just cannot be separated. I do not seek the pain of resentment, but what I will hold on to is the pleasure of judgment. Then, when my gut is chewed up with 1,000 crabs and lobsters and rusty tin cans and broken bottles, I'll get on my knees and hocus pocus the big weasel in the sky, you know. I can't stand this pain. Schmuck, don't bother me. Insane. I think I can hold on to the pleasure of judging you and then pray to God to get rid of the pain of resentment. Total madness. But when I'm willing to give up the pleasure, pain disappears. If I want to get free of the God of punishment, I can't get rid of the God of punishment. But what I can do is be willing to let go of the God of rewards. And as soon as I let go of a God of rewards, I never get punished. It is just that simple. So when there's no longer a payoff and a defect, I found I'm willing to let it go. So, and I've taken the sixth step, as I made aware of it, without thinking. was a totally thoughtless and spontaneous action. I was on my knees taking the 7th step. And that day I was given a gift of prayer. I've come to believe that the gift of prayer is the most precious thing that we're given by whatever this power is that created us. With the gift of prayer, it starts to take on a living reality. And I know from my experience as the prayer that there is nothing to get, there is only everything to give. And I believe AA is the perfect place to give everything away. I also know from my experience that I am unaware of having whatever it is I want until I'm in the process of giving it away. Because I have this belief system of lies, and it tells me I don't have it, I gotta get it. And so I wait to get it before I'm willing to give it away. But as soon as I'm willing to give it away is when I discover I have it in the first place. I also know from my experience as the prayer that I don't pray to God, that there is nothing to pray to. But I pray from God to God, and it's all totally an inside job. That's not a metaphor. It's a simple statement of fact. Life is an inside job. And I believe absolutely, I cannot pray for anything that I do not already have. It's impossible for me to ask for something I do not already have. And the more I pray for something, the more I convince myself I don't have it. Because if I already have it, why should I pray for it? So obviously I don't have it, and I got to keep praying and praying. The more I pray, the more I convince myself I don't have it. So for me, prayer is a means of transcending this belief system of lies that says I don't have it, I got to get it. Because I can't conceive of praying for something I do not already have. So as I peel away the lies and discard the lies, I recognize the truth, and I transcend that belief system of lies. I become aware that I already have what it is I'm about to pray for. I believe that's at least one of the reasons why a prayer is always answered before the words are spoken, because I can't conceive of praying for something I do not already have. I believe the prayer that heals the sick minds and mends the broken hearts that we all bring to Alcoholics Anonymous is the song of love we sing to this thing called God, and I believe God sings a song of love to us. I believe that song is heard in every heart throughout the world and heard throughout the entire universe. And with steps 10 and 11, we can not only sit and hear that song, but experience the simple truth that in all of the universe, there is only one song, and we are that song. Each note just as important as the other. No one note more important or more vital. And obviously you take away one note and the song is changed. But we are that song. It's a living song. With the 9th step, I was given the gift of love. When I was sober 6 months, I became aware of the fact that I had fallen in love with this thing called God. I had been given up for dead 4 times in a hospital, numerous times in the street, and the only thing that kept me alive was what I thought was my hatred for God. And 6 months with you had turned into a love affair. I didn't understand it, but later I read AA Comes of Age, and in the back of that book they called an old Spanish philosopher, and it explained it. And the line is simply, those who deny God deny him because of their despair at not finding him. First time I read that, I understood my entire life. I understood what I did and why I did it. An ancient axiom says the holiest ground in the world is where an ancient hatred has been turned into a current love. So wherever I am standing on the holiest ground in the world. And I believe it's impossible to take the first 9 steps without standing on the holiest ground in the world. It may take you as long as it took me to become aware of that, but I believe it is an inevitable and predictable result of the actions and decisions preceding that 9th step. Oh, thank you kindly, ma'am. Water, neat. Let me pile them up here. with the 12th step, we have this great guarantee: is having had a spiritual awakening is the result. It's the only result we're working towards. It's a spiritual awakening because that is the foundation of our existence. Once I become awakened to and aware of the spiritual foundation of my life, all things are possible. Without that, I am totally lost. And what's worse is I'm not only lost, but I believe I'm not lost. That's how lost you get. Being lost is one thing, but believing that you're not lost and you know exactly what's going on, that's a killer. And in the back of our book, in the second appendix, they take a page and a half to discuss spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. And it's very simple language, and it demystifies the whole experience. Among other things, the word spirit simply means essence.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom?
The Latin root is spiritus, and it means breath. We're simply dealing with the essence of life, the breath of life. This is not some involved theological or dogmatic concept. It is just a very, very simple thing. And the book tells us exactly where we find it, deep within ourselves. There is no other place to find the great reality, deep within ourselves. And this is a flat-out guarantee. You cannot take the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous without having a spiritual awakening. It is absolutely impossible. You make those decisions, you take the necessary actions, it is an inevitable and predictable result, a spiritual awakening. So with this, the 12th step, I have this great gift, the gift of my own personal relationship with whatever this power is that created me. Now, this is not somebody else's concept of God. And this is not some institution's concept of God. And it certainly isn't my concept of God. What it is a power of infinite and unconditional love that has revealed itself to me from within me as a direct result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And wherever I am, all of this power is. I can never have less than everything there is. But being an obsessive kind of personality, I want more than everything there is. And so obviously an obsession cannot be satisfied, can it? But again, I still have this belief system of lies. So I'm unaware of having what it is I'm so desperately looking for. So as I said, for me, this process is a process of uncovering the lie, discarding the lie, and discovering the truth, whatever the truth is at any particular moment in any particular situation. Now, I guess I thought that once you have a spiritual awakening, you just Jesus' little sunbeam or something, I don't know, but that certainly wasn't my experience, because I spent so many years battling my demons that I lost absolutely everything. I lost my physical health, what there was of it, mental health, what there was of that, my ability to work, and after being together for 15 years, my wife had to leave me because her sobriety and her life were being threatened. You just can't live with somebody like me and survive. It was too painful for her to watch me dying and going through these terrible bouts. And we were back in Massachusetts at the time, and our son, who was 12 at the time, this was in January of '83, he was 12 and he elected to stay with me. Now, we had no money because I hadn't worked in years, but a friend back here in LA said that Billy and I could stay with him until I found a place. So we did, and I got on welfare, and I found a little 2-room apartment for Billy and myself. And when we moved into that apartment, we had 2 suitcases each. He had an old army cot somebody gave him to sleep on, and I had a piece of foam rubber to sleep on, and that was the extent of our belongings. Now, I was 14 years sober, a single parent on welfare, and I didn't know what to do. I was so totally overwhelmed by the circumstances of my life. I still don't know how I survived those years. I just have no idea. But I experienced the fellowship in a way I never had before, because you literally fed us, you clothed us, you gave us pots, pans, dishes, clothes. Everything came from the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. That Christmas, I was just torn apart because I didn't know what to do for Billy for Christmas. And it just seemed so unfair that a 12-year-old kid shouldn't have a Christmas because I didn't know how to live. And anyway, what we ended up doing, he and I, we went down to Skid Row and we served food to the people. And it was one of the most glorious days of my life. He was so happy serving food down there and making sure the kids got extra pie and extra milk that he lit up all of Skid Row. And I was so overwhelmed being a part of such a loving and wondrous human being as my son. And we'd walk the streets because we didn't have a car, and he'd hold my hand, and from time to time he'd look at me and he'd say, "You know, I really love you, Dad." And momentarily everything was just fine. All the pain was gone. And we'd pray together in the morning and meditate for a few minutes, and he'd go off to school, and I'd sit there and cry, and I just could not deal with my life. But somehow I didn't drink. I went to meetings and did what I could to help drunks. To this day, I don't know how I survived it, but I just didn't drink, went to meetings, and helped drunks. My wife called. We were back a short time. My wife called and said she was in love with someone else, and by that time, I was so empty inside I couldn't even cry anymore. It was just, I don't know, it was a pain beyond anything I've ever experienced. I thought the term broken heart was just an expression. I didn't know it was a physical reality. I've never had a physical pain like that in my life. And then something wondrous happened, because I had accepted responsibility for her need to leave. So there wasn't that kind of resentment that usually follows a broken relationship. And we loved each other unconditionally, as we still do. So I was praying for her one morning. And this most remarkable thing happened. I pray out loud so I can hear myself. And I heard myself thanking God that she had someone to love. That she had someone to share her life with, to share her body with, to share her God with, and to share her program with. Now I know I'm not capable of sitting down and formulating such a prayer, but I didn't have to. My responsibility, as I understand it, was to make a decision to love, and then take the necessary action. In this case was to pray. And this is what I believe happened. I believe this with all of my being. I believe your love for me wrote that prayer. You not only wrote that prayer, but you put it in my heart and gave me the honor and privilege of speaking the words so that I could have the experience of knowing that I can love unconditionally. And it obviously made a monumental change in my life. As I said, I had a couple of years of overwhelming pain, but there was one thing that would instantly relieve the pain. I would remind myself that love cannot die, that love can only grow and expand and bless and bring peace and joy. So it made no difference where she was or I was or what was happening, that our love was always growing and expanding and blessing. And instantly the pain would go. In time it always returned. But when I remind myself of that, instantly the pain would go. See, when I got here like everybody else, insulated and isolated in the eye of alcoholism. The terrible black loneliness of alcoholism. And I get here, and the very first word of the program of recovery is we. We admit it. And instantly the eye of my disease starts to become a part of the we of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in time, as we continue to practice these principles, we experience the one. the oneness of all life, from I to we to one. When I got here, you did not judge me by the appearance of my illness. You saw beyond the crazed, drunken beast that I believed I was. Beyond that, you saw a sober being. And within that sober being, you saw light, and you saw love. And you held that image of me in your mind as you nurtured me, you loved me, and most importantly of all, you allowed me to make every mistake I must make in order to learn what I need to learn to stay sober for the next 24 hours. And more as I continue to come back to you, I am becoming that image that you have of me, as you are becoming the image that I have of you. And together we are becoming the vision that God has of us. Thank you very much.
Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.